Welcome back to 101 East. This week we come to you from Tokyo in a restaurant that specializes in serving whale meat as we discuss the future and the impact of Japan's whaling industry. Joining us now is Junichi Sato from Greenpeace Japan. Also Masayuki Komatsu, a former whaling commissioner. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us today. Masayuki, if I could start with you. Iceland, Norway, Japan, the three main whaling nations, but it seems that it's only Japan that is bearing the brunt of the international anger when it comes to the whaling industry. Why do you think this is so?
Perhaps name of Japan and the combination with it to the whaling issue make global society consider very kind of interesting issue and help any organization, including Greenpeace, to get funding for that. It's nothing to do with the scientific evidence, nothing to do with legal sort of appropriate interpretation of the international laws and regulations.
So are you suggesting that the opposition mainly is to fund NGOs like Greenpeace?
What I'm saying is that whatever it is, as far as scientific evidence, there are plenty of whale resources, and the international convention fully guarantees the sustainable use of the whaling activities. That's it.
Junichi, you are currently on trial for exposing alleged corruption in the whaling industry. Why do you think there isn't more domestic opposition towards the whaling industry here in Japan? Most of the opposition does come from Western nations, from international societies.
I think it's because the propaganda about whaling as a culture is quite succeeded in this country, while it's not actually culture. Because sending a ship to Southern Ocean where the whale sanctuary is not about Japanese culture, but somehow it's widely spread in the Japanese society. And that's why I think the reason the Japanese opposition is quite low. But in fact, the tendency of the younger generations more opposing to the whaling is getting higher and higher, and demand of the whale meat is getting decreased and decreased every year. So that shows how the Japanese society is also changing.
Masayuki, would you agree that perhaps this is a generational issue when it comes within Japan?
As far as the information they obtain, or sort of the kind of limited base of the information they have it, they can make such argument as they wish, but I fully disagree. And there are plenty of resources in Antarctica, and our rule book, which is the International Convention for the regulation of whaling, clearly stipulates two elements. That is, firstly, the scientific evidence. Based upon scientific evidence, secondly, you are allowed to conduct whaling sustainably. So whether it's a culture or not is secondary. If you can continue any activity for a long time, say for example 100 years, then it's naturally become a culture. Antarctic operation, which started in 1934, it's almost 80 years ago, become maybe a part of the Japanese culture, but it's not important. For my understanding, in order to advocate sustainable use.
Would Greenpeace object to the whaling industry if it can be proven that whaling can still be done, but in a sustainable manner?
Well, that's an if question, so it's hard to answer, of course. But considering how Japan is reacting on other marine resources issues, such as tuna, Japan has such a bad reputation, and this so-called scientific whaling and the science on the tuna is clearly showing that Japan is not capable of managing that kind of resources. And that's why I think that the international community is not believing what Japan is saying.
Is it then the issue that people are angry that Japan is carrying out the whaling activities under research activities?
Japan has agreed to this international convention and agreed with the moratorium of commercial whaling. And Japan is using a loophole of the international convention. Who can believe, we are conducting science by killing 800 whales, including endangered species. It's such a lie to the international
let me
world.
then just ask you this question, and it's a question that I started off with Masayuki. Why do you think there is so much international anger against Japan and not so much against Iceland or Norway.
Japan is the biggest whaling country in the current situation. And even going to the Southern Ocean, where the whale sanctuary is, it's an international water. And that's why Japan is getting so much attention to it.
You mentioned Japan whaling in international waters, and there's a lot of anger against that activity. But a Nippon survey showed that a lot of Japanese people would not object to whaling being carried out within Japanese waters. How does Greenpeace feel about that?
Of course, Greenpeace opposes any kinds of the commercial whaling, because in the past, history shows doing something, whaling on the commercial basis is exploiting the resources, and we have failed that. And Japan's, you can see even the coastal area of Japan, Fisheries Agency is so incapable of regulating the marine resources. And why can you believe that Japan can actually do that in the coastal area?
Masayuki, earlier on you talked about sustainable fishing and whether an industry can be done in a sustainable manner. In August of last year, you were quoted as saying, stocks of northern bluefin tuna, sardine, mackerel and other fish are so severely depleted, Japanese people must change their mindset, and this is when it comes to consuming sushi. Do you think Japanese people should also be changing their mindset about eating whale meat?
No, we must respect science. And we should act based upon scientific evidence. So we must protect those depleted stocks, and we must make an effort to recover it, including northern bluefin tuna. As far as Antarctic minke whales and North Pacific minke whale and blueless whale, which is really abundant, we should, utilize it on a limited basis.
But there is also
that is a
evidence.
principle.
Well, there is evidence that the whaling industry relies very heavily on government subsidies. It costs $50 million to run the annual Southern Ocean whale hunt, and there are claims that there is some 5,000 tons of whale meat that is overstocked. Now, this seems like it's an industry that is on its way out. Why is it still carrying on? Isn't it time to just call it quits because it's not a profitable industry?
Research is very expensive. It requires money, whether you like it or not. Paragraph 2 of the convention really requires, after you obtain main product, which is the science, you have to put the byproduct in the market, thereby you have to appropriately make a transaction of that byproduct, that is to make a sales.
It's all very good to have legislation. And again, you're talking about research that Japan has been doing. But a lot of this research, where is the evidence? Where is the data?
I think data is provided after the analysis to the IWC. But of course, when I am in charge, data for the professional use is not enough. It should be provided in a kind of, readable way for the layman or, global public views. I think the Japanese government must make a further effort for that.
Is the research that's being done, is it a front for commercial whaling?
The science we need to conduct can be done by non-lethal ways. You don't need to kill whales to research them. And the second of all, the whalers who used to be on board with Nishinmaru came to us saying a lot of whale meat taken on board of Nishinmaru was thrown away in Antarctic, while, for example, Komatsu-san is claiming nothing is thrown away on board. But this is how the science, so-called science, is being conducted.
So let me get this clear. Greenpeace wants an end to commercial whaling. They want an end to the whaling industry. Is that right?
Yes, Greenpeace opposes commercial
What will then
whaling.
happen to the thousands of people that are working in the whaling industry?
Well, it's not the thousands of people. For example, this whaling industry, which is virtually only one company called Kyodo Senpaku, because ex-whaling companies have already declared that they are not interested in a commercial whaling. So it's not really a big number of people.
Masayuki, the heart of the matter for this issue, for you really, is not wanting the rest of the world to tell Japan what they can and cannot do. Is that what this issue is?
I think it depends on the substance of what other side is going to tell us. But
you don't want the international community to tell Japan, stop whaling.
Point is that I do not want them to say to us whatever wrong or misguiding to us. Whaling case is one of that. It's not based upon science, it's not based upon legality, but based upon emotion, because other side doesn't have any, scientific, argument, which is convincing.
Junichi Masayuki has just said that he does not want the rest of the world to tell Japan what to do based on emotions. What do you say to that?
Well, being a Japanese citizen, I'm also the one who's opposing this whaling industry because I like Japan and I want Japan to be a leader of the conservation of marine biodiversity. And that's the reason why Japan should be taking positive step towards the conservation of the marine resources. And that's why I'm really keen to end the whaling in the Southern Ocean, and so that Japan can take the lead of the world so that it can actually save the conservation and save the marine biodiversity.
Now, the IWC has come up with a draft proposal, and amongst those proposals will be the reinforcement of the South Ocean Sanctuary, possibly opening up the North Ocean area for hunting. Anti-whaling governments will also be able to set quotas for hunts. Junichi, do you think that's a good compromise?
No. As the current proposal as it stands, it has a long way to be actual proposal which can clearly make sure the conservation of the whales. At this moment, whales are the only ones who suffer, but both whaling nations and the conservation governments are not taking any risks.
Masayuki?
People say that it's a compromise, but I think, to my knowledge, it's really contrary to the scientific evidence, contrary to the laws, contrary to what Japan has been doing, advocating for many years, sustainable use and culture kind of, continuation. And also that may be damaging to the Japanese credibilities. And also I think Iceland and Norway, many other developing countries are opposing that idea.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. And that's all the time we have for this edition of 101 East from the team here in Tokyo, Japan. Thanks for watching.